This is Kite Cutter TV with another presentation. We gotta talk about this. Okay, guys, devastating hurricanes to spur more Central American migration. Back-to-back hurricanes hit Honduras on the same day of the election, and if Biden does actually win, these two events will start a massive wave of new migrant caravans in 2021. A 29-year-old woman that had her home destroyed in the hurricane said she sees no future in Honduras at her age and with her level of education. I think that in Honduras it is very difficult to do again what it took me 10 years to do, Santos said, so her plan is to leave for the United States. If there's a caravan, I'm going, she said, referring to the large group of migrants who make the arduous journey together, often on foot. The hurricane's destruction comes on top of the economic paralysis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic and the persistent violence and lack of jobs that have driven families north from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador in great numbers during recent years. Add an element of hope from the incoming government of President-elect Joe Biden, and experts predict the region is on the verge of another mass migration. This is going to be much bigger than what we have been seeing, said Jenny Arguello, a sociologist in San Pedro who studies migration flows. I believe entire communities are going to leave. OMG. Check this out.
And Biden is expected to announce more transition moves this week, but the president-elect will have to wait until January 20th to start officially enacting any policy, like immigration reform. Our Joe St. George explains.
They are some of the most controversial actions President Trump took over the last 4 years. Immigration reform, building the wall, ending DACA, refugee restrictions. So what could President-elect Biden change? Well, executive orders will be issued, likely on day one, to reinstate DACA protections, which would keep 650,000 plus immigrants who came to the U.S. as children in the United States. Biden will also stop the prohibition of foreigners entering the U.S. from several Muslim-majority countries. Not to mention, Biden is expected to allow more refugees and will stop directing funds to build more of the border wall.
Now, President-elect Joe Biden will be able to change some of President Trump's immigration policies with a stroke of the pen. It'll change right away, but others will take time. Perhaps even years.
What will President-elect Biden struggle to change? Well, he won't be able to take down the 400 plus miles of border wall President Trump built. It'll also be difficult for him to instruct 20,000 plus asylum seekers living in Mexico awaiting court hearings to suddenly enter the United States. Biden will also struggle to end privately run detention centers because of contracts. The president-elect will also need Congress to pass any true immigration reform, which would make it easier for those outside the United States to become citizens. Many of Biden's critics in the U.S. Senate will caution the most important thing that must be protected is the border. Remember, 2 runoff elections in Georgia in January will determine control of the Senate and the future of what immigration bills may get passed into law. In Washington, I'm Joe St. George.
Watch for an open door to refugees, a new conversation on reform, and an end to border wall construction. Heather Sells explains why.
After 4 years of closed doors to immigrants and refugees, a Biden administration would open them. The question being how fast and how wide.
Within 100 days, I'm going to send to the United States Congress a pathway to citizenship for over 11 million undocumented people.
Right now, some GOP senators indicate it's an area of potential compromise, pushing for a middle ground destination. That would mean no mass amnesty and no mass deportation. It could mean, however, a financial penalty.
Some sort of way that immigrants who are undocumented, who are unlawfully in the country, could come forward, they could pay a fine as a penalty for having violated the law as restitution, and then they could earn permanent legal status if they, of course, meet other appropriate requirements.
It might not be a priority, though, given that COVID and the economy already top the political agenda. What Biden could easily accomplish via his pen: new protections for immigrants whose parents brought them here.
And all of those so-called dreamers, those DACA kids, they're going to be immediately certified again to be able to stay in this country.
He is also promising admission to refugees, largely shut out during the Trump administration. Faith-based resettlement agencies are already gearing up.
I think we will see a significant increase, and I hope that that can build because this affects a lot of really vulnerable people.
President Trump's target for next year's refugee admissions was 15,000. Biden wants 125,000. That number might be unreachable, however, given that U.S. agencies have had to close or suspend some 100 programs.
We actually had to mothball a couple of our offices that were doing refugee resettlements. We are prepared to open those offices up.
And national security experts warn it could be risky.
I think it is rather dangerous to say we would just increase the refugee admissions to 125,000 in a year and go up from there.
The system can't absorb that kind of swing so quickly. So it needs to be scaled appropriately, and we need to make sure that we don't flood the system like we did in 2015, 2016.
Biden has also pledged to stop border wall construction, although Border Patrol agents say it makes their jobs easier.
President Trump, of course, has made immigration one of the signature issue of his administration. And so how will his final push in office impact immigration and border policies? What does he plan to do in the remaining few weeks, and how will the pendulum swing under President Biden? Well, with me now is retired ICE acting director Tom Homan. Tom, you've said that Biden would, and I quote, dangerously increase illegal immigration and drug smuggling. And you said that Biden's position on illegal immigration isn't about what's best for this country. It's about future political power for Democrats. Explain what you mean by that.
Exactly right. Well, look, if Biden ends up becoming president, first thing I would do is thank President Trump for making the most secure border in my lifetime. Illegal immigration is down between 60 and 80%, depending on what month you look at, from the high last year, because of success President Trump has had, unprecedented success. So Joe Biden ought to come in and look at that success and build upon it. Because I don't care if Republican or Democrat, Independent, there's no downside on secure border. There's no downside on less illegal immigration, no downside on less illegal drugs, no downside on taking millions of dollars out of cartels' hands, no downside on people dying making that journey, no downside on 31% of women being raped, no downside on being a sovereign nation and protecting Americans. This is a win. So Joe Biden will come in and build upon the success and not tear it down out of spite. Because remember, in 2006, he voted for Secure Fence Act, which is going to spend up to $50 billion on border barriers. Now he says he's going to tear it down out of spite because he's being pushed by the progressive left.
Right now, and a lot of the things, of course, that President Trump did over the last 4 years were done by executive order. He had the authority to do them under executive order, didn't need congressional legislation. Joe Biden presumably can do the same, and especially as the Democrats may not control the Senate. What do you most fear about a Biden administration? What are the things that you think he may do, especially early on, that will undo what President Trump has done?
I think if he follows through on the promises he's made, which include limit ICE detention, put a moratorium on deportations, end worksite enforcement operations, support sanctuary cities, pass an amnesty bill which rewards illegal behavior, and on top of that, offer free medical care to illegal aliens, why would you not want to come to the greatest country on earth? You're going to see a border surge like you've never seen before if he keeps those promises he made during the campaign. We lose the border if he follows through on those promises.
What can President Trump do? He has, again, he's still challenging the election, of course, and he still hopes that he'll be there after January the 20th. But assuming he doesn't succeed, and he's got only 7 weeks, whatever it is, 50 days to go to the inauguration, what can he do in the remaining 7 weeks, do you think, that could help to cement in place some of the changes that he's made?
Look, we're going to keep building that wall right to the last day, whether that's in January or in another 4 years. And he's going to keep pushing common sense immigration policies that immigration should be based on merit, not the one who can sneak across the line and cheat the system. You know, I can't blame anybody that want to be a part of the greatest country on earth, but you can't want to be a part of the greatest country on earth and not respect our laws. You can't disrespect the country as your first act to come to this country. President Trump's going to keep working. He's a warrior. He's done more to secure this border than any president I've worked for, starting with Ronald Reagan. And I deeply respect every president I've worked for. But the fact is, he's done more, and he will continue to do more until his last day in office, whenever that happens to be.
One thing President Trump has particularly done is challenge these cities that have declared themselves sanctuary cities and havens for illegal immigrants. What would happen, do you think, again, if Biden comes in and undoes a lot of that? Many of these cities many more cities perhaps become sanctuary cities. What do you think that will do to what may happen in the country?
Well, look, I think sanctuary cities, let's be clear, sanctuary cities, they're sanctuaries for criminals. They're sanctuaries for someone who's in the United States illegally and commits a crime against a U.S. citizen. They get released from a sanctuary jail back into the community to reoffend rather than turn them over to ICE. It's bad for public safety. It's bad for officer safety because rather than ICE arresting him in a facility where we're surrounded by officers and he's behind the wire, now we got to go find him and knock on the door. And when we have to go find him, we have to go to the community where we're probably going to find other illegal aliens that weren't even on the radar. It puts officers at risk. It puts the community at risk. Sanctuary cities are sanctuaries for criminals, and they need to be outlawed. And I think if Biden becomes president, with a Vice President Kamala Harris who compared ICE to the KKK, you can see sanctuary cities continue to grow in this country, which is dangerous for the American citizen.
Tom Homan, thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Officials in San Jose, California are pushing to change the sanctuary policy in Santa Clara County after a deadly stabbing spree last month. Since then, investigators say they learned the suspect, Fernando Jesus Lopez, is an undocumented immigrant who had previously been deported 3 times. Let's bring in Tom Homan, Fox News contributor and former acting ICE director. I want to listen to the mayor of San Jose and then get your reaction on the other side. Tom, watch.
Defendant should not have been out on the street. Where an undocumented offender has a record of violent or serious prior convictions, the county should be notifying ICE that a person will be released out into the community.
The police chief and the DA agreed he should not have been in the community, in the country, much less on the streets, and yet ICE they will not cooperate with. Tom.
Well, look, I agree 100% what he's saying. I've been fighting this for several years. The 2 murder victims that were murdered by this alien, they'd most likely would be alive today if they wouldn't have this sanctuary policy. He was in and out of their jail. ICE put a detainer on him numerous times, and they ignored it, and they released him. And the county executive, Jeff Smith, is saying, well, we're using this as a political weapon. Jeff Smith needs to be reminded, this same thing happened last year. In January of last year, there was a person they arrested, an illegal alien, was booked in their jail 7 times. And ICE dropped a detainer 7 times, and they released him every time. The last time they released him, he stabbed to death the 59-year-old lady named Bambi Larson. So this has happened numerous times in this county. So my question to the county board and to Jeff Smith is how many rapes, how many murders have to happen until you work with ICE and protect your community from criminals?
Yeah, that man, by the way, broke into Bambi Larson's 59-year-old woman, broke into her home and brutally stabbed her to death. And he had been accused of assaulting police officers, had a very lengthy record. You mentioned Jeff Smith. He said following here, and I'm quoting, this sort of popped up out of the blue with them, basically trying to take advantage of a horrific double murder, trying to promote their political agenda, which has been talked about numerous times. I think it's extremely unprofessional. Unprofessionally, he says, Tom, to use this double murder as a bludgeon to get rid of sanctuary cities.
Well, 2 things. First of all, it's a stone cold lie. This isn't a one-off. This has happened numerous times in that county. Second of all, if anybody's unprofessional, it's Jeff Smith, because every chief of police in that county, except one, has asked that policy be overturned. The California State Sheriff's Association, as you know, came out strong against SB 54, the state sanctuary policy. I think the only sheriff that hasn't voiced against it was a Los Angeles County sheriff, but every other sheriff in the state has voiced concern about it. So Jeff Smith's refusing to listen to his law enforcement professionals, and he's caving into the immigration advocates and the open border people. He failed his #1 responsibility to protect the community from criminals. That is his failure. He needs to be held accountable.
Yep, and we're talking about San Jose and Santa Clara County, but across the state there have been multiple incidents just like this. Tom Homan, always good to talk to you, sir. Thank you.
Good morning. The Supreme Court hearing arguments over excluding illegal immigrants from the 2020 census. Joining me to explain the implications, former DHS Oversight Counsel and Senior Advisor Mike Howell. Good morning.
Good morning.
So President Trump wants to exclude illegal immigrants from the census, and that count is used to figure out how many House seats each state gets. He says that if you include illegal immigrants, it incentivizes states to promote illegal immigration. What happened during yesterday's Supreme Court hearing, and why is this important?
Right. So first off, the president doesn't want to exclude them from the census. The Supreme Court already ruled about a year ago that they could not do that. What he wants to do is send a number to Congress for apportionment purposes. That is determining the total number of seats you get in each state for Congress. And that number should be based off of the amount of illegal, citizens in that area to exclude illegal aliens. So the Supreme Court was grappling with this question yesterday. It came up from appeals. The appeals court basically said that it could have a chilling effect on participation in the census. Now that the census taking is over, that's no longer the case. They also argued that this will have an injury to states because some states will lose representation in an unfair way. The Supreme Court was told yesterday that we aren't sure how the data will work out, so it's way too speculative to even try to figure out what the injury would be, which is a requirement to each state. So the Supreme Court had a bunch of questions whether, is the right time to hear this case if we don't have the final numbers. And there's a lot of back and forth between the parties over the relevant precedent and case law, including, the census director and the Secretary of Commerce having a lot of authority to kind of, at the direction of the president, entertain these policy questions.
Yeah.
They've done this before, with foreign citizens who are traveling in the country or on business, as well as the issue of what to do with, military members on base in a district or overseas.
Yeah, and one of the reasons some say that President Trump might have a tough time winning this is because the Constitution, the way it's worded, it sort of it points to all residents being counted in the census, not all citizens. And that's a point that Judge Amy Coney Barrett was even mulling over yesterday. Is that right?
Right. The relevant word here is persons.
Yeah.
That has been construed to mean inhabitants, which has been construed to mean people with an allegiance to an area and enduring ties. I think it's fair to say illegal aliens have no allegiance to the United States. Their allegiance is to their home country. They have not renounced their allegiance to their home countries and becoming a U.S. citizen. So that is, one of the questions they are dealing with. I think from the policy aspect, it's a slam dunk. Of course, illegal aliens should not be counted for congressional districts. They cannot vote. They are not U.S. citizens. This is not their home country to which they bear an allegiance. They can't be drafted for the military or perform jury service. They're simply not relevant for the purposes of determining how our, as Americans, congressional districts should be structured.
Yeah, and of course, all of this is important because it decides the House seats and the amount of federal funding each state gets. And, every state wants a bigger slice of that pie. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe. Till next time, God bless. Peace.